Welcome back to the Delaware Way. I'm Larry Mendte. We're going to talk about a specific case as we welcome a new cold case unit to Newcastle County in Delaware. And this is the case of Jane Prichard, who was killed in 1986. And the details about her life and her murder are just heartbreaking. I want to welcome back Colonel Elmer from the Newcastle County Police Department. It was his idea to start this new cold case unit. Tom Orzechowski, a Newcastle County police detective who is now with the cold case unit, and Glenn Davis, retired Newcastle County sergeant who is also a civilian investigator and is giving his time to reopen, I shouldn't say reopen, to relook at some of these murder cases and attempt to solve them. Thank you all so much for being here. Let's talk about, and let's go right down the line, let's talk about the specifics of the case. The Jane Prichard case, tell us what it is.
You know, I'm going to leave a lot of this to the investigators,
okay.
But I will say that what's interesting about this case is our county executive was the chief of detectives on this case back when it occurred, and Tom Gordon, and he had read about a DNA case in England where they were attempting to identify missing persons. And he thought, what if they used it to identify a suspect? And that's the first time that we know of in Delaware where DNA was ever even attempted. We did attempt it in this case, but interesting that we weren't quite where we are now. So I think that's where a real sticking point in this case is going to come from is that DNA. And I'm going to let the detectives talk about it.
Okay, the specifics of the case. Tell us what happened.
The body of Jane Prichard was found September 20th of 1986. She was located in the Blackbird State Forest Park. She was located with a gunshot wound to her back, and she was partially disrobed. She was a student of University of Maryland. She was working on her master's degree. She was in the park alone that day conducting experiments on plants. During the investigation, media release was sent out. After that release, a hunter came forward. That hunter had specific information on what Jane was wearing, the car she was had it in her possession, and the actual scientific equipment she was using. That hunter believed he saw her shortly after 10 a.m. During the interviews with that hunter, he made a lot of suspicious statements that led the investigators to believe that he wasn't just a witness, that he was possibly a suspect. There was some initial testing done on the evidence at the scene, which came back consistent with the hunter being a contributor to that evidence.
So you found DNA of the hunter at the scene? Is that what that means?
Back in '86, it wasn't DNA. It was basically a hair, and it was microscopically consistent with the hunter.
I thought DNA was used for the first time in this case.
Further investigation, that hair was sent out to a lab to do DNA testing, which when it came back was inconsistent with the hunter being the contributor of that. But there's additional evidence that's still was located at the scene that's still available that more tests can be done. In today's technology, you don't need as much of a specimen to attempt to obtain a profile to identify a suspect.
In your experience, these type of cases are solvable this many years later? This happened in 1986.
They are. I remember this case. I was a sergeant on the police department at that time, and I remember the resources that went into this. And with the information that we have now compared to the information that was available to us scientifically then, we have come leaps and bounds. And I firmly believe that with this new scientific evidence, that this is a very solvable case. So I'm glad that we were able to revisit this.
How many cold cases do you have?
I think the total is 37, going back for about 2 decades.
And why did you specifically pick this case out?
True victim.
I'm sorry?
A true victim.
Are they all true victims? I mean, maybe I don't know.
She's basically in the park.
Means.
She's doing experiments, and she's gunned down.
So that was the only reason?
That, and there's a lot of evidence left that could be tested.
Right. I mean, I guess what I'm getting at, are you looking at cases you think are, I shouldn't say worth the resources, they're all worth the resources, but you should put resources in because they are more solvable at this point than other cases?
Right, and going back, like I said, to the evidence, I mean, there's a lot of evidence there that can possibly lead to a suspect to help close the case.
Is it all scientific evidence you're looking for at this point? I mean, or is there something else? Is it when you open up a case like this again, or you warm up the case? I don't know what the term is. When you look at the case one more time, I know you're saying you're doing it because there is some scientific evidence, and you've come a long way since then. Is that all you're looking for?
There's other merits of the case to look at. There's witnesses that may need to be re-interviewed. There are telephone and cell phone. Actually, back then there wasn't a cell phone, but there was telephone information that needs to be traced and revisited.
Was that not done?
I don't know that in this case, whether the cell phone was done. The witnesses were obviously interviewed. However, it is proven that re-interviewing past witnesses is productive. Circumstances in witnesses' lives change, and they then may be willing to come forward with some additional information, or as time goes on, they may remember something that they didn't know before or forgot.
When we talk about this case, you can talk about the details of the case, but I would imagine when you're out there searching for somebody that might have seen something or somebody that might know something, you're looking for some specific people, and this is a way of reaching out to them. That's when we continue.